Hello, and welcome to the Elemental Expo District Energy Conversation Series. I'm Justin Etherington from Buro Happold, and today this session will be brought to you by Buro Happold, a multidisciplinary engineering consultancy, and Danfoss, a leading supplier of hydraulic equipment, including heat exchangers, control valves, and innovative design software. I lead a team in London looking specifically at energy projects. Look at anything from strategy development, compliance, through to industry research. We believe that distributed energy is one of the keys to unlocking climate change mitigation, and district heating is one of those technologies that can make a big difference, but it must provide resilient, affordable, flexible heat. In this series of conversations, we're talking about the state of the market, trends and technologies here in the UK, the need or not for a regulatory framework, financing of heat networks, and what the future can hold for district heating in the UK. We know now more than ever that the times are uncertain in the future, but we are all committed to a low carbon future. The momentum is growing and recognition of the need to transition away from fossil fuels is coming louder every day. So it's an exciting time to be in the energy industry, and with the district energy currently providing around 2% of heat in the UK, 2 to 3%, and forecast to grow to up to 20% in 2050, there's a real expansion that needs to happen. But the only way that district energy is going to play a role is if it can be competitive in the market. So today, I'm really pleased to be joined by Bobbie and Soulla to talk through the state of the market, the trends in technologies. I'll now hand over to Soulla to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Soulla Paphitis. I'm a business development manager for Danfoss in London and the South East, predominantly working on district energy heat networks. We are a supplier of substations, heat plate exchangers, control valves, metering, and all the associated products that you would see on a heat network. But more so, we also look at modelling tools and softwares as a service in the networks themselves.
Great, thanks, Soulla. And Bobbie?
Yeah, I'm Bobbie Milligan. I'm a project manager from Colloide Engineering in Northern Ireland. I work mostly with the district heating networks provided by Colloide. We're design and build contractors based in Belfast.
Thanks very much. And I'll be adding my 2 cents worth with the consultant's view on the heat network world and future. Just want to start off really with a real question to the panel. About the market size and what you've seen in the change in the last few years. Soulla, would you like to take that?
Yeah, so I mean, you touched on it earlier there, Justin. So currently in the UK, there's only between around 2.5% and 3% of our heat supply being provided by a heat network. And the potential of growth in the UK is exponential. We see a lot of potential projects at the moment. We've worked on quite a lot of feasibility studies with some local authorities. We've looked at the funding from HNIP and BAYES, the potential projects that are available. You've got some really huge schemes happening in Scotland. So Scottish government are really, really pro heat networks. So the potential of growth in the UK is exponential. And, I think if we are going to hit those sort of 18-20% by 2050 that are hugely possible, then we really need to start pulling our fingers out and getting moving. And I think there's a lot of things that we need to do as an industry to get there, but I think it's definitely possible.
Great. So from a Danfoss perspective, the UK is a high potential market.
Oh, yeah, extremely. I mean, I think we can surpass that 20% by 2050. If we get the fundamentals right now, there's no reason why we can't be, looking at 30-40% of district energy. I mean, I think potentially the issues are when we talk about single homes and single dwellings. We're also very used to our gas boilers at home, and asking rows of houses to connect to a heat network, I think, will be far more of a challenge. But you look at the government's ambitions and growth for social housing and the housing market itself and how much it's growing. You've only got to look out down the road and down high streets and see land being being bought by, developers to see the amount of housing that's going on. And if we could just tap into those alone, I think that we would have, that we would far surpass the percentages that are being thrown around in the UK.
Great, thanks. And Bobbie, from a contractor perspective, how do you see the market size and what's happened for you in the last few years in that area?
Yeah, in the last few years, we've seen a lot more. You've mentioned there building and contractors putting up new dwellings. In the likes of London and big cities, there is an initiative or an incentive that if you are within connection distance to a district heating network, that you're obligated to try and join it and to do a feasibility study. Seeing that means that every new build that goes up, we see calls come in to see how much it will cost or what the options are for connecting to the network.
Mm-hmm.
And new buildings are considering installing their own district systems. So in the likes of London, you're putting up a tower block. They'll size for their tower and their needs, but they are opting to offer for extra potential there for the local community. And we're seeing a lot more drive for that.
And from a Colloide perspective, I mean, you've just completed the very exciting Bun Hill phase 2 energy centre. How did you get yourselves into that position to tender for that work and be successful?
Yeah, Colloide was primarily a water treatment company for at least 5 or nearly 8 years. But with the opportunity that came with the RHI incentives in the UK and Ireland and Northern Ireland, we started tendering for smaller scale biomass boilers and CHPs for the likes of farmhouses or community centres and sports pitches. And having that experience and that basic understanding and development at that stage, that allowed us to start tendering for the bigger projects. And we put our foot in for Bun Hill and won it quite gladly.
Congratulations, it's a great project to be involved with.
That's brilliant. It's one of a kind so far. And with that now getting across the line, LUL has opened up its potentials across all of London. You're talking, I think, of 70 potential over exhaust ventilation ducts. There's say maybe 7 that are viable, and they're really pushing for potential people to come out and tender for work there. That's
really interesting. Do you think, or how's that been working with? I mean, it's a little bit of a side point, but it's important to know that because as we move towards waste heat utilization, it brings in another party into the mix, someone that you have to engage with, and it also has that sort of knock-on effect of risk being or intervention being required into a third party's assets. How's that? How have you seen that as a working practice?
It doesn't go without its little hurdles. I mean, LUL is a governing body on its own. It's a bit of law of itself. So you have to rely quite heavily on them meeting their deadlines and meeting their commitments, which at the start quite rocky, but once you build the rapport and build the development with them, we've come to quite a good working relationship. We're putting together, we've talked to each other, we talk to their controllers talk to us, and automatically or via manual intervention, we are in control of their exhaust ventilation and they're in control of our heat pump for likes of safety scenarios,
Yeah, absolutely. So is that something, I mean, is that something you've seen from a Danfoss perspective, or maybe something that you are able to bring some experience from and some of the knowledge share from your Scandinavian heritage?
Yeah, so we were very fortunate actually to have worked with Colloide on the Bun Hill project itself. So you will find Danfoss products within that plant room, which was it had its own challenges with designs, and obviously because it was an existing building, we had to make sure that we could get the product within the space requirements and things like that. So we were very fortunate to be a part of that. And actually, a year or so before, I'd taken part in the Euroheat and Power District Energy School and done a bit of a presentation on using exhaust heat from the underground for social housing. and worked out that actually the central line, if you used all of the exhaust heat from the central line from Stratford all the way down to East Acton, you could use the energy provided. I mean, logistically it doesn't quite work, but if you just look at the facts and the figures and the numbers, you could provide enough heat for a tower block, just to be able to provide space heating. So, you know, it is something that they've also done in France. There are some studies where they've used exhaust heat to heat homes and houses there. So it is definitely something that, as Danfoss, we're very innovative, looking at different heat sources and ways that we can transfer those heats and in order to provide a greener energy. So yeah, I mean, there's huge potential from waste heat, you know, not just from exhaust, but from, you know, energy from waste, from using you know, data center, additional heat from data centers, from supermarkets. You know, we've got a great case study at the moment in Denmark where we've worked with a supermarket chain, and they've rolled out across 90% of their stores a heat recovery system, which is now being used to heat the surrounding homes from the supermarket. So, you know, there's some really great things that we can take from, you know, our European partners, I guess, and peers, and establish those connections and those working practices in the UK. I think, you know, if you're talking about supermarkets, the amount of heat that's wasted from a supermarket, we really need to get, you know, the big chains involved in this and get them actually thinking about the local areas that they're in. You know, these big supermarket chains are generally within domestic areas. You know, there's generally social housing around them. So it makes perfect sense in the world that we live in now to take their excess heat and use that to help poverty-stricken or poorer areas or poorer homes in order to heat them, so that they're not having to use fossil fuels, and there is that reduction in the cost of heating their homes. So yeah, I mean, there's loads of different things that I could say that are happening all over, you know, worldwide for Danfoss that we could take experience from. We just have to be open-minded. I think there's a saying, isn't there, that every day is a new learning day. But we just have to open our minds to open ourselves to the lesson that we're being taught. And if we can do that, if we can open our minds and you know, listen to what lessons we're being taught from other people, and not just from other countries, but from other businesses, you know, from other manufacturers, from, you know, contractors that we work with. If we learn from each other, I think the process will be much simpler, and I'm sure we'll get there quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. There's I mean, there's not a resistance, but there's a need to combat change and to get over change and move into a new set of relationships, which as Bobbie pointed out, but you just can get agreement of the processes and everyone understands the basis, then the change maybe isn't as radical as it first seems. It's just a new normal, which is everyone's favorite topic. And by the way, so I would really love to pick up on that technology. It sounds fantastic from the heat recovery from the supermarkets. Just a question really. Obviously the waste heat discussion that we've just had is started around the tube, but it's something that's going to become more and more, I suppose, should be adopted, certainly from a consultant perspective, looking at what we need to do to make future regulations work. We're going to need to be mixing a lot more low carbon heat into our systems to hit what we expect compliance to be. Are you seeing, Bobbie, from a contractor's perspective, any difference in the geographical location of future opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, we've come from London, where you're in a very small tight square of, you can fit 2 containers and that's about it on the entire site, and you're expected to produce, you know, 2 and a bit megawatts of hot water and electricity. We're always going to be stuck with that in city centres, but we're seeing now, as energy centres get bigger and develop a bit further, the smaller ones are petering out to much larger energy centres, distributing to a larger area. So the likes of up in Newcastle, we're into an industrial estate. You know, you move into what would be commonly the power station or the localized power station back in the early days of electricity. It's sort of following that pattern where it's localized, then it gets a little bit bigger, and then it steps into the large scale with the larger pump sets over longer distances.
It's moving into the slightly lower value land, huh?
Well, that's it. It's the brownfield sites. But then what you see with the 5th generation coming in is a sort of reversal of that again, where you're back to the local boiler room and it's just a pipe network in the road. So with 5th generation, you put your heat pump in the building rather than have a larger heat pump at the top of the road. It's just where the economy of scale drops away.
Yeah,
I think that when you're talking about moving into the 5th generation of heat networks, you're talking about connecting a number of different heat networks to create a mega grid. We look at heat networks in the UK, and in comparison to Denmark and Sweden and places like that, they're minute. We would be a micro network. So what's a big network to us in the UK is a micro network to Europe. So I think the difference is that they look to connect their micro networks to create this big network. And that's where you start to see these smaller energy centers all feeding into each other, and then a much larger energy center outside in a brownfield yard or land, or in an industrial estate or somewhere like that, where they're then able to use energy from waste, so adding a waste plant into that, and then that feeds into the network. And then you start to see much smaller little pumping stations across the network in order to pump that energy and to put that to the right areas that need the energy source. And then I guess connecting buildings becomes far easier because there's networks running past the building, so it only makes sense that the building then connects to the heat network. And this is the evolution of where district energy needs to be. I think the problem with where we are now in the UK, and Justin, you touched on it, there's this closed protection. It's my network, no one else can connect to it, or in order for buildings to connect, they need to be a certain rating, and a lot of the buildings in the UK don't quite meet that criteria. So then for them to connect to the network, it then brings the running of the network down, and higher temperatures into the network. So there are so many different things that need to be considered. But I think we just need to expand our minds and expand what we deem as a heat network. We're working on micro networks now, but what we should be doing is looking at these much bigger networks in order to benefit us all.
It's interesting you say that, because it really makes me think about that we just haven't yet developed enough of the smaller networks to enable that interconnection together. And so what we're either trying to do is have a modest scheme that everyone feels comfortable with the level of cost, risk, and deliverability, and then, or we're trying to challenge ourselves to go straight into the larger heat offtake, sort of the larger version of that really major works, and getting everyone aligned and on board that it's going to work is a much bigger challenge. So we're trying to, on the one side, we need to continue really working up and making a good case for proving the efficiency and reliability of the smaller networks, while still really trying to work out how to convince people to go to get the bigger infrastructure in. And I think Bobbie, when we were having a chat earlier, you mentioned the experience that you've had from more industrial type use, and I think we can learn a lot about the actual scale of industrial work that goes on, which we can bring into the more the more retail heat sector, and to give people a bit of confidence that it's things that have been done before. I was just wondering, Bobbie, a question really about the size of you as Colloide as an operation, and how you find that in the market at the moment, and what the trend is for you looking forward, and what you need to do to reinforce your position.
Yeah, there are some big key players out there. We've started off as a bit of a small fish in a big pond, and that's the hurdle that we're getting over, is that people go to the big names, and it's hard to get past that sort of commitment and the history that they have in the industry. So what we find is we're putting in tenders, and we're getting a bit of a bite back and having to fight that little bit extra to win the next one. But Bon Hill has been great for that. It's because it's so revolutionary, because it's got such exposure online and through the council, that's really helped with us in advertising. And as well, Danfoss has done a lot in helping it, because once we started engaging with Danfoss on the likes of LinkedIn and advertising is a bit harder together, we've seen our exposure go through the roof.
I think it's really important to bring in new players. You know, it's always great to have the big guys, you know, and it's always great to work with these guys to see how they're developing and to understand, you know, their thought process in how it's all going to work. But I think, you know, heat networks to work can't just rely on 3 big players or 4 big players. You know, we need to bring in the smaller contractors, the guys that want to do the work that the big guys don't want to do, you know, because there's always those jobs out there that the big guys are like, oh, you know, is that going to put enough you know, capital on? Whereas, you know, some of the smaller contracts will work that little bit harder for it and actually take the guidance and the knowledge that we can share. I mean, you know, as a manufacturer, we can offer guidance and experience from the projects that we've worked on, and I do tend to find myself, a lot of the smaller contractors are happy to take that assistance and that guidance and work closer with us, and that whole collaboration part is a huge benefit to the industry. You know, in order for any industry to grow and to really, you know, put stakes in the ground, there has to be collaboration. You know, you can't be closed off, you can't be closed-minded. You know, to be able to open up and collaborate and work effectively with other people is the only way that an industry grows. So, you know, it's been a great experience for us to work with Islington Council, to work with Colloide, to be a part of the Bun Hill project, you know, and it's a great story. So yeah, shout it from the rooftops, let everybody know about it, and why not? Because it's innovative and it's life-changing, it's game-changing. You know, let's take something that nobody ever wanted or ever thought about before and use it to benefit people. You know, these are social houses that this energy is feeding, and it's feeding a local leisure centre. You know, these things, especially now where you look at the situation where we're in, you know, no one could have predicted the pandemic that we're all experiencing this year. No one could have predicted the cost implication that would have on, you know, on everybody. So to be able to take something that's already there and use that as a source, you know, and reduce the cost of people heating their homes, I mean, it just makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the other benefit there as well is with Bun Hill, we're Bun Hill 2, phase 2. We've installed a couple of CHPs and a heat pump and a distribution circuit, but we've also tied into an existing network. So it's part of that extra step as well, whereas you're taking 2 smaller networks, joining them together to try and benefit the lot. And then it's the interface between 2 energy centres as well. We've designed to manage the control structure and the SCADA system that allows our 2 energy centres to talk to each other, but not fight.
Yeah, and see, and that's the evolution, isn't it? That's the evolution, that's the growth of a heat network, and you know, Bun Hill 3 will happen. You know, I know that Islington are really heavily looking at new different buildings that they can connect, and you know, I know it's under a different name now than you know, there's other innovations that they're working on, but you know, they're really paving the way. And I think, you know, Islington are really keen to show that they are, you know, the most innovative London borough, and they want everyone else to follow suit. And absolutely, why not? You know, Stratford's a huge area, and if you just you know, at Stratford city centre itself, where there's already a huge heat network, if they extracted some of the heat from the central line there, I mean, they could feed that into the energy centre, and you know, even if it's only a minute amount of heat, that minute amount of heat takes away from burning fossil fuels. So, you know, I just think that we should be learning from these great things that are happening. We should be taking these experiences. I mean, I saw a project a little while ago where they were going to put an energy for waste plant in London, and the only place in the borough that they could possibly think to put it was underneath a bridge. I mean, it doesn't really make sense, does it? Put it somewhere else and run the pipe so that it actually works and it benefits the people that live in that borough, you know. So I think that we just have to be a little bit more clever with the designs of these things. You look at some of the buildings in Denmark. I mean, they've got an energy for waste plant in Denmark, and the building looks amazing. You know, architecturally, it's stunning. You wouldn't be
a ski slope on the back of it.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
right,
you wouldn't be bothered by that if it was down the road from your house, would you? I mean, let's be honest. You know, you'd probably be more inclined to recycle your waste and then be able to ski down the slope. You know, I mean, it's a way of re-educating ourselves. I think, you know, we're just so at a point where we're siloed. And it is definitely about, for me, is the education and collaboration, and only then will we move past where we are now. And, you know, working with contractors, working with, you know, consultants for better designs, you know, working with other manufacturers to make sure that it is the right product that's being provided. It's not always about, you know, for me, it's not always about getting a sale or making sure that it's my product over somebody else's. It's making sure that it's the right product for the job. You know, and I think that that's a key point. You know, we often, you know, for contractors as well, you often get in a fight about pricing and other things. And, you know, ultimately it's not about that. It's about creating a network that works, that's efficient, and that can be run and maintained and benefit the people that are living on it. You know, we want people in single dwelling homes to connect onto heat networks. We have to prove the technology works, and getting into a fight about it with other people isn't going to prove that.
So we've talked about the market size, which, you know, one, in potential, if we're to meet our commitments, needs to be large, and we've seen that there are still you know, opportunities coming forward. We've also talked about the dilemma as to what scale they should be. In terms of the trends, we've talked a little bit about, obviously, the clear move towards greener integration of greener sources of heat. We've also talked about how actually we need to look at a more open approach in terms of getting people to buy into a more open market, but, you know, cognizant of that really needs the collaboration you're talking about, Soulla. Just looking at technologies and the change in technologies and the response there, because from a consultant perspective, we're right in a very difficult position in terms of justifying investment and trying to get business cases that will stack up economically. And there's really great support out there, but the move that's currently happening, which is right for our long-term future to move away from CHP, has really underpinned so many schemes in the last decade. But looking forward, you know, we're trying to make a clean break, and if we're to make our climate goals and things, we do need to make much swifter movement on that. Bobbie, I'm just interested to know from your perspective, what are you seeing as the changes in technology?
You're seeing a lot more of a step away, like I say, from CHPs, or if there are CHPs, they're a lot smaller and they're more plug and play, easy to swap out if the future comes. And you're seeing again a more heavy drive toward where we can use heat pumps and an installation of that. But as well as that, we're seeing an addition of battery storage in the energy centre site. So it's not just district heating, and it's not a heating energy centre, it becomes a proper energy centre. You've got that addition of local scale energy production and self-sustaining energy. You know, I see in a very near future where energy centres are possibly separate from the grid. They're running themselves and maintaining themselves whilst delivering heat and some surplus electricity to some local you know, factory, or be it council dwellings or leisure centres.
That's really interesting about the move to the energy centre in its purest of senses.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, it's one of the things that we've been looking at is and seeing is that actually be able to fit, as you say, the CHP in a matter to complement the heat pumps. You can get an economic performance, but we can also get a good marginal cost of heat, which helps with trying to get the business case away from it. Soulla, are you seeing a similar thing? I mean,
Yeah.
what I'm interested from Danfoss is also how you're looking at your more digital approach to design and how you're applying that to the future of technology.
Yeah, so we are seeing a shift from CHP to heat pumps. I don't think I'm going to be controversial here. I don't think heat pumps are the answer. They're not the silver bullet. They are a stepping stone as far as I'm concerned. There is another technology. There is something else that's going to come after the heat pump that's going to be, you know, the maybe not the holy grail, but it will be the next best thing. So yeah, we are seeing a big difference. We're seeing a lot. I'm seeing an awful lot more projects looking at ambient loop systems, and then that's where you start moving into this 5th generation, where you actually have to start boosting the temperature for domestic hot water. One of the key things that we're looking at the moment, or one of the key things that we've developed and are ready for market with, is software solution design softwares, where you can actually create digital twins of your network. And actually look at creating what if scenarios. So, you know, we could put in Islington Council's heat networks, and then we can start creating what if scenarios. So what if we connected XYZ building? What if we needed an extra energy source? If we put in a, you know, large heat pump or battery storage or solar or thermal storage system here, and wind, solar here, how we could connect that all together, and how that would design what the impacts would be, how many buildings we could connect. So the software package itself is able to do all of that with some very, very simple inputs into it. You know, for me, heat networks becoming digital will mean that we are able to do much more. Creating digital twins is an important factor. You know, it creates better feasibility. It creates easier conversations with clients. You know, if you can go to 3 buildings that are going to be running alongside a network that you're looking at installing, and explain to them the benefits of them connecting onto it, offer them optimization solutions for their building, so that we can make sure that their building is fully optimized, efficient, and running effectively, so that when it connects to the network, it's not being penalized for returning high temperatures. You know, all of those digital packages that are available within the tool will all start to benefit the growth of networks themselves. And it really starts to bring in this 5th generation's idea, where, you know, if one building is creating, or it's creating a much higher amount of energy than it needs, it can start trading with the building next to it, so that, you know, that building isn't burning any fuels, and it's using the greener energy, or it's transferring the heat from the building next to it. So, you know, trading systems becomes a part of a natural progression for heat networks. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think that digitalizing heat networks is a benefit to everybody involved, for consultants that are designing, for contractors that are installing. You know, it gives you pipe size, it gives you dimensions, it tells you the depth that the pipe needs to go in at, you know, and then for local authorities and, you know, people like the GLA and BAYS to understand the pure potential. You know, I think these are all hugely important factors.
Brings us towards the 3Ds of decarbonization, digitalization, and democratization.
Democratization, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's very important. Bob, I'd be interested to know for you, what does digitalization look like from a contractor, and how does buying into that sort of digital approach work for you?
We haven't looked at it too much ourselves, other than in the Bunhill Energy Centre, we've got our own PLC SCADA system that analyzes the gas data, the electrical wholesale data, the cost per kilowatt hour thermal for the heat generated. And we use an algorithm to determine what is the best financial way to run the energy centre. Is it to run CHPs and charge the store vent atmosphere, or is it to run the heat pump, or is it to run both, or half, or 50%, or to authorize the other energy centre to run, stuff like that. But there's definitely a benefit in digitalization, because if, like you say, you can create a mimic of your entire network where it's easily to drag and drop a load on and test how your energy is going to cope with that. Of course, people are going to jump on board with that. That makes the whole process easier. It takes the miles away from my head.
Yeah. I mean, it's always nicer to let someone else calculate it,
exactly.
Isn't it? Yeah. Let the computer do it. It's easier.
And in terms of just in terms of from delivering your projects, I'm assuming that you're fully integrated into BIM, and are you handing over a full model at the end of completion? How does that look for you in integrating the things that you're producing into a future sort of O&M role and part of this digital twin. Is that something that you're thinking about, or is it something you see on the horizon?
Something on the horizon. At the minute, it's still in the sort of old phase of O&M manuals get handed across, and it's up to the client then to manage that data and to work out, where to go in the future. We're part of the O&M contract then with Bunhill and delivering heat in Islington, so we're contacted regarding new connections, and like I say, it becomes then an assessment on our side. What have we sized for? Can we feasibly put in a new connection on that 80 mil line if there's already 6 other rooms on it? So that's we're at that hurdle at the minute, and we're in that transition where we start to send over proper, like say, BIM drawings, BIM data sheets and data profiles, rather than just product data and CAD drawings.
Yeah, certainly from it's the way it's going, and I think you mentioned it, Soulla. I think we all need to, in terms of our roles in the supply chain, come respectfully together and remember. I mean, one of the founding principles from Buro Happold that I know of was from Ted Happold, who was a structural engineer, but he was also really very much a building engineer, and he understood from the beginning that the success of a building project was that you got a very nice building out at the end of it. You could have the best structural solution, but if the best structural solution had no coordination with the MEP solution, then it wasn't going to be a very good building. And so everyone had to work together, and everyone had to give a little bit and give their best, but by working together was how you got the best product out at the end for the client, which is ultimately what everyone's trying to answer. And so I think really that approach of understanding that it's not a competition between each of our roles in developing a solution, it's our responsibility to work together to get the best out, means that a consultant design engineer needs to talk to the contractor's design, it needs to talk to the supplier and the specific selected equipment that's in there, and it all needs to come together and for the benefit of the long-term operation. And I think that's something that we're going to have to get much closer to as we continue, and we are much closer than we were. So as you say, Bobbie, it's just something that we're looking towards.
It has definitely improved. I would say engagement has definitely improved. From where I started in heat networks sort of four years ago, and from where we were then to where we are now, I think there has definitely been improvement. There is a desire for people to learn from each other, which is it's hugely important to do that. I would just say that it's not necessary that you're always going to get the right answer the first time, and if at first you don't succeed, try again, but we will get there with collaboration and experience and knowledge, and there's so many people out there with some fantastic knowledge that are all too willing to share. We just have to ask the question, I think.
Absolutely. Great. Well, I'm going to say thanks very much for a great discussion. But before we leave you, I'm going to ask for what would be one wish that we could have for the I suppose the trends and technologies and the state of the market today. If there's one wish you could have, and Soulla, I'm going to ask you first, and then Bobbie afterwards. If there was one wish, what would you like more of?
Just collaboration, open book collaboration, learning from each other, and being open to looking at different solutions. Digital is definitely going to be the way forward. We have to embrace it. We need to understand that that's a part of life. That's what's going to happen. So yeah, for me, it's just being open, being collaborative, and doing what's right for the actual system.
That's great. Bobbie?
It's a hard question. I want to put batteries in everything, and I can see great potential for batteries and heat networks as well. But I think that the big nail for us would be if education to the client and building operators was better. We find we're going into buildings and you're just asked, can you put a substation in there to take heat off the network? And thumbs up, that's fine, we can do it. They haven't understood the system, and they haven't understood what they need to supply, so you end up with high return temperatures. And it's just the nature of putting in a substation or attaching a district network to a building that was built in the 60s, 70s, if not sooner. So that's where we want to see a bit more development, so it's not just the fighting match you can get into with high returns.
Absolutely, that's a common seen problem, and very challenging. Well, can be very challenging to resolve. But I think Danfoss have got a few useful products that we can use it in that space. But my one bit would be a similar piece really. It'd be, what I'd really like to see is people who have a resource trying to enter into the discussions with an open view, rather than seeing it as something that then tied to and locked into. So I think too often small opportunities such as just a small amount of waste heat, as Soulla mentioned, it makes a difference because it offsets some fossil heat. And it's going to be our way through this is to make iterative gains, and as we move through and make smaller incremental gains, not like Dave Brailsford, eventually will win. So I'd just like to say thank you very much to Soulla and Bobbie for joining me for a really interesting discussion. That was the first session, the state of the market, trends and technologies. We covered quite a lot today. 3 more exciting sessions covering the need for regulatory framework, financing of heat networks, and then what could the future hold for heat networks. And hopefully you'll join us. So thanks very much, and thank you again to my guests.
Thank you.
you.